Good afternoon. My name is Sam Beasley. I am EdTech specialist for ViewSonic. So I support customers such as States of Guernsey pre-sale and post-sale. So I've been doing lots of work with these guys and their teachers on the island. So throughout this discussion, we will be having a conversation on what that journey has looked like. So I'll just pass you over to Nicola. Do you mind introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so I'm Nicola. I'm from the States of Guernsey, and I am basically the person who oversees digital learning and development as we move through our roadmap and implementation. Most people don't seem to have heard of Guernsey, and basically we're a tiny island off the coast of France. We're not part of England, we're not part of France. We're just very small. So we're 9 miles long, 5 miles wide, and we've got 20 schools. And we made the decision that we were going to replace all our EdTech boards in all our classrooms, in all our schools this time last year, or maybe a bit earlier. And we replaced them with ViewSonic boards. Okay. So just to go into a little bit of history, in 2018, we looked around at our digital estate and decided it wasn't in a good place. And we drew up a plan of what we wanted in the future. And one of those things was making sure we had one-to-one devices, we had working EdTech boards, and we called this our digital roadmap for education. It was going to be a really, really significant financial spend, as you can imagine, with 20 schools. And we had to request funding from our central government. And this took some time, especially because we ended up with this thing called the pandemic in the middle. Unlike the UK, the pandemic didn't really push Guernsey into a digital revolution because we weren't in lockdown in the same way at all. And our schools basically carried on going pretty much as normal all the way through. So, in addition to our digital roadmap, we also have a strategy for education, which is on the screen. And it's a vision of what we think education should look like. And digital really comes into all the areas, and making sure our classrooms are a really good, effective learning environment. And the digital technology supports the pedagogy was really central to what we wanted to do. So we began a really big piece of procurement work. And we looked at everything we wanted in our screens. And basically, when we got to the end of that, ViewSonic were the ones which best matched what we were trying to do. And you can see here on the screen a quote from one of our secondary teachers about how and what the impact has been of using the board on their teaching.
So my area of interest and responsibility is supporting teachers with the use of digital technology in the classroom. And one of the things that we've found with the ViewSonic panels is that the software, which is also under the purview of ViewSonic, so they've got control over that as well, allows teachers to be very flexible in the way they use the panels. So the software is available on multiple platforms as well as on the panel. And the support we've had from ViewSonic has also enabled us to provide training in lots of different forms. So Sam and his colleagues have done webinars after school for teachers. You've also been on island and done large group sessions. We've provided training of various kinds. And that has been really important, that we've been able to meet different teachers' needs at different times in different ways. And the fact that the boards can be used in a variety of ways has also enabled teachers to integrate them very easily into what they want to do in the classroom. The panel, the technology doesn't dictate to the teaching. The teaching allows the panel to be used in whatever way best suits the teacher's practice.
I mean, that makes it a challenge with regards to CPD, because there are different delivery methods, different devices, different approaches. However, you're absolutely spot on, Victor, with having that flexibility for the teachers is huge, because we've found, especially on the island of Guernsey, some teachers plan out their Google slides, sign into the boards, the application natively, access their resources without connecting a device. You have others who prefer to open my viewboard whiteboards on an Apple device, cast to the screen. That gives them the flexibility to be front facing and not with the back to students writing on the board. So with my viewboard being device agnostic, as I said, super flexible, but with the training element, it's something that we've had to have sort of conversations, and it's at times, this not just with Guernsey, it is challenging when you're saying, right, you could do it this way, you can also do it this way, and then we've also got option 3. But I think in the long run, when we do things progressively, as we have done, we're getting there. And are you feeling that now teachers are implementing the new technology?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that from day one, people were really excited about what the panels offered and what you could do with them, and how both the staff and the pupils, engaged with them, and the impact it had on teaching and learning. But you're absolutely right. The fact that we can, if you like, show people a way to use the boards and say, well, this will get you started, but it doesn't stop there. Once you've got familiar with that, there's a whole new set of things you can do, but you don't, as you rightly say, you don't have to pile that onto everybody. And very importantly, you're not saying to teachers, this is the way you have to teach if you've got one of these in your classroom. This enables you to develop the way you teach in whatever way you want, because the device and the software is so flexible. And I think that flexibility in the device and the software, we've tried to reflect in the flexibility of the training, so that it really trying to confirm to teachers that we're not telling you this is the way you've got to teach. We're actually supporting you in how you want to teach your students. And it also fits in very well with our high quality inclusive practice agenda, which I think Nicola wants to say something about.
It's like playing pass the parcel with the microphones, isn't it? So, no, okay, you can keep yours. Okay, so I think the important thing to say is Victor and I feel really strongly about CPD, and that's one reason we went with ViewSonic, is because when we spoke to you, you also seemed to get how important the CPD was to make it work. And Victor's right, we've got a chosen pedagogy, which is basically high quality teaching, that we want our schools to follow. And so we had to make sure the tech supported the pedagogy and people knew how to use the tech, and it didn't just turn into an expensive white elephant of a TV screen on a wall, which is, everybody's scare factor when you spend this much on screens. So we did have a plan with our CPD when we started. I'm sure you remember. It's very different to what we're actually doing now.
Yeah, I think initially, did we decide to go for a super user approach?
Yeah.
Who were trained as the experts within different schools, who could then pass on their knowledge and expertise onto their peers.
And that worked to a certain extent, because they did go and do all the initial training in the way that we planned. But then some of the super users ran with it. So May, we put a quote from her on the board behind you, May ran with it, and she set up a program in her school to make sure that they were getting CPD and really learning how to use the boards. But other super users just weren't confident enough to, which is when we got in touch with you about doing live webinars. And we did quite a number of those and reached around a quarter of our teachers who basically opted into live webinars after school to find out how to use the boards.
And has feedback suggested that the webinars have had greater impact?
Yes. So the webinars have been great, haven't they? The webinars, I think, were the real game changer for us, because we had them set up so our teachers were there with their screens, and they were following along with your TIFF on their screens while you were talking it through. And so they were actually doing it in real time. And
I think that's another thing that does make a difference. When it comes to CPD, the lecture sort of demonstration approach, I don't think it's not always effective. I think for teachers, they need to be hands-on. They need to be shown a skill, shown a feature, and then given time to put it into practice. And I found with the setup with the webinars, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think that's probably the thing that's made the biggest difference.
Yeah, and it made a big enough difference that we started doing them where we organised them centrally, but then schools started requesting to have their own one in their normal CPD slot. And so you've now done a number of those, and you've got some more booked in coming months. And so schools using their inset time to do the same thing within school. And so that's been, we were driven to it basically because we're an island, it's hard to get to us. We're not, you can't just come over for an hour's CPD, but actually it's been more useful than I think it would have been if you had come over, stood at the front and just shown everybody.
Agreed. And it's not the easiest place. You can't just pop over to Guernsey, can you? A last minute session. Do you mind coming over this evening at 4? It doesn't quite work like that. So
no.
we have to plan ahead, and we have to be rigid with our approach.
And obviously, some schools did really want to have a face-to-face session, and that's where Victor came in. Do you want to say a little bit about those?
So again, what we did was offer schools a variety of options. So some schools opted for me to go in for a morning and then have drop-in sessions with staff. We also ran, as it were, webinar style, but with a real person in the room, even though that real person was me. But picking up your point, we were in a school hall and we had 4 panels on trolleys. So I would do a 15-minute input, and then the staff would have 30 minutes in small groups to actually try out the things. And we found that practical hands-on approach made a huge difference. And of course, the advantage for Guernsey is because we're a small place, actually it doesn't take teachers very long to get to a central location. And so that kind of webinar style, but actually with the trainer in the room, followed on from what you did. And it, again, been very popular, and the hands-on element is key to it.
For sure. Especially when you're delivering it, Victor, because Victor is also a My View Board expert. He knows all the features inside out, so he's very valuable on the island for the teachers and implementing the new software too.
That's very kind of you. I'll give you some money later. But as I say, I think the other key thing is by providing training and support in lots of different formats at different times in different ways, it's enabled teachers to dip in when they need or want the training, rather than give a big dollop of training on a particular day and then nothing for the next 6 months. That little and often approach is very important.
Correct. I think it has to be progressive. It has to be planned. It has to be staged, because information dumped on teachers all in one go, it's too much to take in. So the fact that we've had that progressive approach, where it's been bite-sized and they've been building on the skills and the knowledge, I think it's worked.
It is, and it's coming back to the EF's research about what makes successful PD, and that idea of it being a process, not a single event. And doing that and trying to put that into practice has made a massive difference. And it's meaning as we carry on with our digital roadmap and start looking at our one-to-one devices, we're thinking about doing the same thing and the same way of working. So we've learned a lot during this about what works in our schools. I think one of our lessons is realizing, we have to be tenacious. We have to carry on following up. We have to carry on making sure that they have that CPD offer. And we had hiccups along the way. One of our schools had an inspection phone call Monday morning, after they'd had new view boards installed in all their classrooms over the weekend. And that was a little bit of oh my God, we've got to make this all work within 48 hours so they can teach before the inspection. But that worked because they had a super user that we'd trained, they had support from Victor, and we could make it work. So making sure you've done the planning and we've really thought about the CPD before we put the screens in was, I think, one of those really valuable things, as well as being flexible once we had the screens, once we could see what worked.
Agreed. That was something, again, because you guys, when we were having these early conversations on what the training program's going to look like, you guys were meticulous with the planning. So, and it's worked, and hopefully it will continue to work.
Sure it will.
And with regards to, I think we've spoken a lot about sort of CPD. We've spoken a lot about why ViewSonic. Can you tell me a little bit, have there been any teething issues? Have there been any issues along the way with implementing such a big project? And tell me a little bit about how we overcome those hurdles.
Well, there's always teething problems, and some of our teething problems were just around actually making sure the setup was consistent and worked in all the classrooms. And that's more challenging than you think, especially because not everybody wants their classroom set up in the same way. And then, once you can overcome those issues, you can make it work. But where there are those little things where things don't work as promised, when somebody first goes in, that's a real block.
For sure. And I think having those, you mentioned about connectivity. Can you tell me a little bit about how teachers will typically connect in a classroom? Because again, I know that there's not a single approach across different classrooms. So if you could tell me about that, please.
A number of our teachers will want to plug in their staff laptop and then connect HDMI and a USB, so that not only becomes the screen for the laptop, but also effectively a touchpad for the laptop. So you move away from your desk to the panel and do everything from there. A lot of teachers also like to just, as you said right at the start, use the panel as a standalone device. And almost the first thing I tell people who are new to these things is, think of this as a giant Android tablet nailed to the wall. And I think sometimes people neglect the fact that it's not just a screen, it's a computer in its own right. So you can use it independent of any other technology. And also, because it's a computer in its own right, if you want to use a visualizer, there's a USB socket on the front of it. You can plug your visualizer straight into this, and then you can use your visualizer in the way that you always have. And so the fact that people can use it in those different ways is important. And I think the third thing that people sometimes do, and we're kind of moving to this, I'm not sure this is what people would do on day one, but is casting from student devices to the panel, being able to share student work. So again, it's that flexibility, the fact that you can use it in all those different ways. And probably to start with, plugging in the teacher laptop and using it in the way I described was the number one option. But I suspect that as time goes on, it will no longer be the number one option, because as people realise the power of the panel in its own right, the laptop will become less and less needed.
Agreed. And I think, again, introducing the concept of using this as a standalone device, it makes sense to do that. That's something that can be built upon. And when I say that, I mean, so initially the laptops are an environment the teacher used to. They're comfortable within that Windows environment. So having the My Viewboard application on there to sort of dip the water in a little bit, learn some of the features, but not a completely new way of working, was a great way to introduce it. They're then familiar with that software and the different features and tools within it, and then we can look about, okay, I can do my planning on my laptop away from the classroom. I can produce my slides, my teaching resources, whatever they may be, and then I can walk into any classroom, sign into that board nice and easily. I've got my Google Drive connected with my Viewboard account, and I can access those resources within a different platform and teach in a slightly different way, with all the different tools and functionality within it. So I'm glad that these methods have been working for you guys. I'm glad to hear that you feel that we're getting somewhere with the CPD and it's making a difference with the classrooms. Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything that we've missed before we wrap up?
I think it's realizing that when you buy the screens, you have to be prepared to put the funding into CPD, because yes, you guys do a certain amount for free, but we did a lot internally as well. And, you know, for example, here, Karen is telling us that as part of the CPD provision, she was able to spend an afternoon each week throughout the term working with a year group at a time to develop resources and so on. We funded that. And we funded that sort of thing in all the schools who wanted to do that. So actually being prepared to put money into it, which is beyond what you can offer, was really important, because otherwise you're spending so much money on this sort of EdTech. If you neglect the learning and development for teachers, it doesn't work.
And Victor, anything else to add, or are you happy? Have we covered anything on your journey?
No, we're fine.
Okay, so I'd like to wrap up there. Just like to say thank you very much to Nicola and Victor from the States of Guernsey. And we will continue to work closely together and see this project through. And hopefully we'll see greater impact within the classrooms on your lovely island.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
much.
Thank you.